הדוברים במושב זה הם כולם אנשים שמומחים בנגישות, יש להם עוד מכנה משותף, הם כולם חברים בוועדת המומחים של נגישות אתרים באינטרנט ותורמים את חלקם ברמה שרק מי שיושב בוועדה יודע להעריך, או שהם חברים בוועדה או שהם משקיפים בוועדה, וגם באופן זה הם תורמים לנו רבות. הדובר הראשון הוא אדם סלומון שכבר מחכה פה. הוא ממשרד החינוך והוא חבר בוועדה הבינלאומית לתקן נגישות Wcag, ואני רוצה להגיד לכם שבעצם דרכו אנחנו מרגישים קשר ישיר לתקן הבינלאומי, כי אם יש לנו שאלה שאנחנו לא יודעים עליה תשובה, אז אדם ישר פונה לכל חכמי תבל ובא עם תשובה, וכך אנחנו יוצרים את אותו מסמך שדיברתי עליו מקודם, שהוא שכבת הסבר לתקן שלנו, מה שאנחנו יוצרים בוועדת מומחים. הוא כמובן חבר בוועדה שלנו, והוא ידבר על מגמות שינוי מרכזיות בהנחיות Wcag 2. הוא ידבר באנגלית כי זאת שפת האם שלו, אבל שלא תחשבו, הוא מבין כל מה שאתם תגידו בעברית. אז בבקשה.
Okay. Hi, my name is Adam Solomon, and we're going to talk about Wcag 2. I'm a developer at the Ministry of Education, משרד החינוך. At the end, you can ask questions in Hebrew, that's fine. Also, you've got my mail there. Feel free to mail me any questions, comments. Okay. Obviously, I'm on the מכון התקנים, בוועדת נגישות. Also, for a few years, I've been on the International Standards Committee, the Wcag Working Group. And let's see what that is. First of all, the Wcag has a theme song. I really suggest all of you go into and see the YouTube video. It's really cool. It was made with a screen reader. And we just want to debunk the myth that web accessibility professionals are geeks. We're really not. Okay. What is Wcag? It stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I'm sure there's some of you are more familiar with it than others. It's now in version 2, and it forms the basis for most countries that have legal standards for web accessibilities use Wcag 2 as at least a basis, and some, like Australia and Canada, have adopted it outright. The USA uses Section 508, which is very similar to it, and it's in fact based on it. And also, our own little country here, Israel, has adopted Wcag 2 as the basis for our standard and made a few changes along the way. The Wcag WG, the working group, is the committee that works and produces the Wcag and maintains it as well. So I've heard a lot of people asking, when is the next version of Wcag coming out? It's not. There's not going to be anything but Wcag 2 in the near future, and we're talking at least 2-3 years. Why not? Well, first of all, there's a big issue with backwards compatibility. So let's say corporations, companies have gigantic websites, and they've made their website successful according to Wcag 2. Now, if you come out with a new version, legally that means you have to now conform to the new version. That's a lot of money, a lot of manpower, a lot of politics. So that's one main reason why there's not going to be a version in the near future. Another reason is resources and manpower. Most of the participants in the Wcag working group are volunteers like me, and volunteers don't like to work too hard. So we're really short on manpower, and therefore a complete revamp with a new version is going to be really difficult. Also, just a technical point, with the W3C, the Wcag standard is part of the W3C, which is sort of like a whole bunch of collection of standards in all sorts of science, computers, everything, just like מכון התקנים, and they have their rules. And their rules state that there can't be any conflicts within a particular standard, which means that if Wcag is going to address all the new issues of low vision, cognitive, and we'll get to all these issues in a few minutes, They have to make sure that their entire standard, that there's no conflicts between any of the clauses. And that's not so easy to do. Another point I want to make about Wcag is it applies to web content. What is web content? Web content is material, content, pages, etc., that you can get to with an HTTP address. That's not really 100% accurate, but it's almost 100% accurate. This excludes things like FTP. This excludes native mobile apps, desktop applications, all of which can be made to be accessible, but they're not part of Wcag. But it does include, and not everyone knows this, anything you can download from a website. And that includes Excel docs, PDF, Word, YouTube videos, all of that, because you can gain access to it by the web with an HTTP address. That has to be accessible by the Wcag standard. Wcag 2 is composed of a number of layers. Now, this is a source of great confusion. The first layer of Wcag are called the success criteria. 111, 112, etc., etc. And that's really the core of Wcag. The reason why it's the core of Wcag is because it's testable, meaning there's a definite test you can use to see if the person is conforming to that particular success criteria. There's another layer to Wcag, which are the technique documents and the failure documents. There's understanding documents. All of these other documents come to sort of explain what exactly the success criteria are trying to do. Now, these other documents are called informative, while the success criteria are called normative. What is normative and informative? Normative is you have to do this in order to conform to Wcag. Informative means you may do this. It might be sufficient, but you don't have to do this necessarily. Only normative can form the legal standard. And that's obvious because if it's not testable, you can't enforce it. So let's take a few examples here. No, actually not yet. Let me see here. Actually, I do want to do an example here. Okay, let's take a look at 144. Success criteria 144 is resized text, which means that a web page has to allow you to resize text up to 200% without loss of content. Now that's testable, meaning if I have a web page and I increase the size of the text to 200% and I can't see part of the content, for instance, let's say the developer used overflow hidden on his body, then you're not going to see some of the content when you increase it in size. Now that's testable and that's normative. You have to have a web page which you can resize up to 200%. However, if we go into the different ways that you can conform to this, we'll see that I want to point out two ways here, two techniques which are sufficient, which you can use, which you can use to conform to this success criteria. The first one is G142, using a technology that has commonly available user agents that support Zoom. Well, if your web page is being viewed in a browser, and every browser today supports Zoom, then you don't have to do anything, because you can use your browser to resize the text up to 200%. So, sorry, it could cause a scroll, a horizontal scroll, but that's all right because that's AAA. And 144 is, I've already forgotten. AA, very good. So if you're coming to conform to AA but not AAA, so you can use the browser Zoom even though it's going to cause a horizontal scroll. So that's one way of being in conformance to 144 where you actually didn't have to do anything. Another way here is G143, 178, providing controls on the web page that allow users to incrementally change the size of text. We all know what that is. That's the plus and the minus that never work. So that's another way of doing it. So these two techniques are sufficient, each one by itself, and that's informative, meaning I don't have to do a particular technique. I can choose which one I use to conform to the success criteria. But the success criteria is normative, meaning I have to, at the end result, get to a point where my web page can be resized. Okay. Another set of documents which are sort of parallel to the techniques are the failures. Everybody likes failures because they're very precise and exact, and they tell you that if you don't do this, then you're in violation of the standard. Take F65, for instance. F65 used to say, if you don't have an alt on your image, then you're violating the standard. Today it doesn't say that anymore. Why not? Now, what does it say? If we go to the test procedure for F65, hopefully you can see that, you can either use an alt, like it says in number 1 there, or area labeled by, or area label or title. And this is all new. It never used to be there. So what happened? Well, as technology developed, you have new ways of conforming to this success criteria. So therefore, even though failures, people love failures, and there's been a great demand for increasing more failure documents in the Wcag, the truth is that we're taking away failures. We're removing failures because as technology develops and there's more ways to conform, the failures lose their significance, because it's very difficult to write a failure such as, well, check if this is present, or check if this is present, and you keep going on and on and on, 10 different things. So therefore, failures are losing their significance. ודאי. לא מזמן. Well, you're supposed to come every year to the כנס נגישות האינטרנט. There's a public, when the Wcag comes out with new documents, there's a public call, so that there's public comments. You can make comments before it's even adopted. You know what? You know what? There's a few. I have a lot to cover. Can I address that in the question period for 5 minutes afterwards? Thank you. All right. Okay. In Wcag, there's 3 levels of conformance: single A, double A, triple A. As everyone knows, A is sort of the basic. Without less than single A, it's not considered accessible at all. Double A is really, for most web content, the suggested standard. Triple A is really something that they made to strive for. Most large websites will have a serious problem getting to AAA. Smaller sites that are really dedicated to accessibility, like WebAIM, they can get to AAA, but it's more of a goal as opposed to a reality. Now, there were different factors involved in where they determined to put each success criteria at its particular level. Does it affect all web content or only some web content? Are there alternatives? Let's take 141 and 143 as a use case. 141 is don't use color as the sole means of conveying functionality, meaning when you have, let's say, a control on the web page and you want to indicate that that control exists or that it's something different from just text, so you can't just use color. You have to use some other form of indicator to tell us that this is, let's say, a link. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at 141, you'll see that actually one way of conforming to 141 is to use color, but with a high contrast ratio. So actually, when 141 says you can't use color, it doesn't actually mean that. It means you can't use color which is at a low contrast. So therefore, links on a page, which many website designers don't like to put the underline for the link, they can use a color as to distinguish the links from the rest of the text, as long as the color has a high contrast ratio. Whereas 143, which is high contrast, the requirement that all text on the page be at a certain contrast level, and there's big text and smaller text, that was put at AA. I don't know all the reasons why. There are a lot of people ask why that shouldn't have been single A, because it's a pretty important thing. One of the reasons, though, was because, as you know, in browsers, there's a way of overriding the page colors. Each user can, in his browser, control the various colors that the text in the background are presented in. So since there's some alternative, that was one of the reasons why they made that AA and not single A. So there's all sorts of reasons why they decided AA, single A, triple A. It doesn't necessarily mean that AA isn't important, but it means it's less, it applies less often. Okay, one more, no, we'll skip headings. What's next? If there's not going to be a new version of Wcag, what is there going to be? Well, everyone knows, the group and all the accessibility world knows that there has to be some changes, because things like mobile, these are technologies that really weren't developed at the time they came out with Wcag 2. So instead of coming out with a new version of Wcag, they've decided to come out with something called the extensions. The extensions framework will add new success criteria, but it won't be completely a part of Wcag 2. In other words, there'll be Wcag 2, that will be left as the base, and then there'll be extensions, which means that if you want to conform to Wcag 2, you stay the same. If you want a higher level of accessibility, then you take Wcag 2 plus one or more of the extensions. So the extensions are an additional layer to Wcag, and it has to be more stringent. In other words, an extension can make it more accessible, but not less accessible. Let's give an example. An extension could say that a AA criterion is now going to be single A, but not vice versa. Take an example. There was a suggestion in the accessibility world to make 143, which requires contrast, a minimum contrast on web pages. There's a suggestion to make it single A. It hasn't been adopted yet, but it's a possibility. So that would be an example of an extension. So if you're in conformance with Wcag 2 and you want to stay there, so 143 would remain at AA. Whereas if you wanted to be more stringent, then you would take that particular extension in addition to the Wcag standard, and then you would say, okay, 143 is now single A. The extensions framework gives every institution or legal body the ability to decide for itself while still maintaining conformance with the original standard. No specific extensions have been drafted yet. It's basically been in process for about a year. And it's going to be at least another year until anything really comes out. Where's the focus of the extensions? The focus of the extensions are 3 new task forces, 3 new committees, which they've formed. And they're focusing on the 3 main areas of accessibility, which are prominent today. One is cognitive, then there's low vision, and mobile. So cognitive, let's go into low vision. Low vision is a task force, and they're supposed to come out with suggestions for new success criteria for low vision users. And low vision users, Tam Hazman. Okay, that's good. So low vision users are people who need higher contrast. Then there are some low vision users who need less contrast because they're light sensitive. So this group is going to provide new success criteria for all these kinds of users. Also, another suggestion, if we're talking about horizontal scroll, is that horizontal scroll be lowered to AA, which would essentially mean that responsive websites are going to be mandatory. Again, this has not been adopted yet, but it's a possibility. Adaptive layout, sorry. Cognitive. Cognitive has done tons of research into all sorts of disorders, dementia, dyslexia, Down syndrome, and Lisa Seaman, who some of you may know, is in charge of that. And they're focusing on web content primarily, which is making web content more easily understood. The problem they're having with that is that when you make web content simpler, then you can ruin it for more advanced users. If you're talking about scientific web content, you don't want to make it too simple. So that's the main problem that they're having there. They're talking about alternative contents, adaptation, using automatic tools, which IBM is producing, that can take complicated text content and turn it into simplified content. That's one area. Extra validation is another area where you provide more validation information about user input error. Timed events would be a possible success criteria, saying timed event, a more stringent requirement for a lack of timed events. Next, mobile. Wcag 2 does cover mobile to a great extent. In fact, at the last page here on the presentation, you'll see links, and there's a document that the Wcag 2 came out with to show how mobile is covered by the current standard. But there's also a new proposal for more success criteria, which would include things like minimum touch area. It would include something like all functionality can be accessed via touch, just like currently there's a requirement that all functionality can be accessed by the keyboard. Everyone knows that. So they would add to that a new success criteria about touch. Pinch zoom, not making sure that the developers don't stop you from pinching and zooming, etc. Okay, here's some links. If you download the presentation, you'll get the links for the extensions and for all the different task force documents that they currently have. Tam Azman. 5 minutes for questions, right? No? He has a question. I promised him I'd answer it. Yeah.
תקן שמחייב אותנו בתור התקן הזה, מבחינה חוקית. עכשיו, בגלל שהתקן הזה משתנה כל הזמן, מה זה אומר? אם יש לי 500 אתרים, אני צריך על כל תיקון שישב בתקן, לחזור ולממש אותו.
No, זה בדיוק מה שאמרנו, ה-Wcag 2 נשאר אותו דבר. So if the Knesset doesn't adopt the new extensions, it stays the same. Alt, you now have more ways of doing the same thing. So if you implemented the previous document which said use an alt for images, you're fine. You don't have to change anything. But if now you're coming to make the website accessible, then you have other ways of doing it. More ways. Exactly. More is better. Yes.
בנושא האלטים והטייטל, איזה עדיפות יש? אם אני שם גם טייטל וגם אלט על תמונה, לדוגמה, כי יש הרבה SEO שעובדים רק על האלט, ולא בהכרח זה משדר מה שהתמונה אומרת.
מבחינת נגישות, היה ויכוח ענק על הדבר הזה, האם לצאת אפשרות לא להשתמש באלט לטובת דברים אחרים. היו הרבה אנשים שהתנגדו מזה. אז לכן, אלט הוא עדיין העדיפות ראשונה.
אבל יש אלגוריתמיקה של accessible name. יש למשל אריה לייבל, הוא יותר חזק גם מאלט וגם מטייטל. כלומר, יש...
יותר חזק באיזו בחינה?
מבחינה של מה ה-assistive technology should announce.
אבל all assistive technology תומך ב-100% באלט. כמה שידעו לי.
אז אם יש לך גם אלט גם טייטל, גם אריה לייבל, אז הוא אמור לקרוא רק את אריה לייבל.
אוקיי, נכון. אז זה צריך לשים לב באמת ש... בדרך כלל קוראים רק אחד מהם, והוא סוטג, יש עדיפות, יש סדר... Okay, thank you very much.